That works. Good afternoon. I'm assuming that we'll get a bit more audience as the panel progresses, but it's really good to see you this afternoon. You've got quite a few options today, but this is the 8th installment of this panel discussion, and we've got some brand new voices to compare notes with today. And we're essentially talking about TV and film and video. And you're here because you're interested in developing strategies and partnerships and developing content, not only as a brand, but also as part of a distribution package. Today, we're going to talk about domestic distribution, international opportunities, both on the software and hardware side, content development, marketing, and branding. I'd like to introduce our austere panel today. We've got Phil Lott, who runs Ample. He's the co-founder and president, and he's the showrunner for The Pitch and the director for Undercover Boss. Brant Pinvidic is a television producer and founder of Envelope Entertainment. Alyssa Friedman, this is her first time with us. She's the vice president of production and development at Covert Media, and she's got some interesting projects to share with you as well. Philip Safran is coming back. He's the head of content activation, brand, and rights management for Vindibona Productions. And Doug Desani is the creative director for the integrated marketing, for the integrated marketing department of Ignition Creative. So let's get started. Today's core tenet: why do we continue to market and brand? By bludgeoning the customer with our name, which was certainly effective in the 20th century, and was the 20th century version of marketing, in contrast to what's happening now. What's more important at this moment than the product is the product experience. And whether you're producing within Hollywood or using Hollywood as an emblematic virtual destination, content has taken on a life of its own, and we finally now, at long last, have been talking about a number of tools that have finally come of age that are helping us take our content to our niche population, our niche marketplace. My name's Kimberly King-Burns. I run Convergent Solutions, and we've been working with film studios and music labels and educational providers since 1995 to help them integrate digital media into their operating and their marketing capabilities. And it's been a fantastic ride, from CD-ROM as an archival medium to today working with virtual reality and mixed reality and augmented reality to help develop across content platforms. There's no such thing as a dull moment. So today, what we're going to talk about, in short order, is the best strategy for standing out in a saturated market. And what I'd love to do is have Phil Lott talk to how best he takes a project, takes a storyline, takes the related branding campaign, and effectively works to increase consumer recall and brand awareness. Phil.
Thank you very much. Well, I'll admit to being, this is my first panel here, so thank you for having me. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
I'll admit to perhaps being on the sort of the business end of this panel a little bit in terms of my experience in terms of some of the stuff you guys have been doing is very limited. So as a program maker, as a producer of content, we are oftentimes not able to wag the dog in terms of what the outlets are doing with our content. So we look at content in two very different ways. One is, as program makers, just making the best damn content you can, and that's and hopefully that will find its market. And the other way is by finding what else we can be shooting, what else we can be delivering, what else we can be providing with the studio or the outlet, so that we encourage them and hopefully make their jobs a bit easier by having all this extra content ready to go out with. In terms of branding, we have since the beginning of Ample, we've been going almost 3 years now. We have seen my business partner, Ari Mark, he came from Xbox Studios, which was the last place he was at. And if you want to know about sort of cutting edge delivery of shows, there was nowhere better than that at the time for the brief period it was around. And so he came at this very much with the opinion that all our shows had to be branded from the moment we created them. And so we put a lot of time and effort into putting logos and putting packages together at a pitch stage, which, I think I've been in a lot of different production companies, and that wasn't always the case. Gone are the days where, a simple Word document on your pitch is as something you'd send to a network. I mean, now it's a fully designed thing. We put a lot of time in it. We have artists available to us. We conceptualize where this logo is going to be seen, how it kind of impacts the experience of the person opening the document for the first time, and how they can, hopefully we can sort of make them see where that project's going to go, and how the audience is going to experience it. So that's sort of how we approach things.
And that's a good segue for Alyssa. What challenges are you facing standing out in a rather crowded marketplace, whether you're talking about OTT or traditional media or digital? The sky's the limit at the moment. How are you best figuring ways to stand out?
Yeah, it's hard. It's tough. I think one of our biggest challenges is talent, and how we can attract talent to us when the talent is, being attracted by all of these other places like your Netflix and your Amazon and Hulu. A lot of, for us, we really like that we have these new platforms, because as producers, they are our buyers, but as producers, they will eat up all the talent for, months and months on end. So you try to book someone on a film that you're shooting, they're on a Netflix series for 9 months, and the Netflix series pays them, 5 times as much as you're going to pay them on your film. So, it's kind of this balancing of, we really love to work with them. We actually did a Netflix film, and it was a really great experience. So we hope to do more. But we're also fighting against them in, trying to lock in actors and directors and writers, because really it's just, some of these places, it's too good to be true. They're getting really great fees.
Well, isn't that an opportunity as well, especially as you expand internationally, to grow the next generation of actors and writers and producers and take a chance on whoever's going to be the next Spielberg, whoever's going to be the next Luke Cage?
Absolutely, and it's a different, the talent that Netflix or any of these other platforms are attracted to is different from the talent that, let's say, international distributors are attracted to, which is totally different from domestic theatrical, so it's, you kind of have to figure out, like, what do these people want? What are they looking for? Especially with, the Netflixes, they have these algorithms now, so they know what people like and they know what people are watching, and so, they might want a certain cast member in a film that you would never think to put in there, but because they know that they're watching, their movies or their television show, they want that person in that film. So it's interesting, but it's a totally different way of doing business.
Well, Brant, what moments of serendipity have you found along the way? Whether you're trying to make a project open big, what surprises have you encountered?
Well, the problem is now it's such an open market. It's like the wild, wild west, but not in a good way. It's like you can't put your finger on anything anymore that will work, that could work. As the business evolved, you used to be a showrunner could really put a feel to it, a taste to the show, and you'd almost be sure that the audience would find it, or you'd put a little extra effort into it, and like, this is a great show. But after so many years where good shows don't rate, shows that I was not very impressed with that I've produced rate right in front of my nose, and it's just like, it's harder to pinpoint where anything good is going to happen because I don't feel in control anymore. And I feel like with the way that the digital world has exploded and the direct connection to the audience, we're not allowed to sort of like speak around the audience anymore. Like, I think when there was just 4 networks, the networks were telling you what was good shows.
Right.
Or even like in the birth of HBO, like When HBO would release a new show, I'd watch it and I'd like it. I don't even know if it was good. I just knew that I thought I should like it because it's HBO.
Right, the branding.
And we sort of fell into that mode, and now it's like that's all gone. Like the audience gets direct access to the things you put out there, and that's terrifying because I don't understand the audience really. I understand my network buyers. I understand how to tell them about what the audience is going to like, and I know how to tell them what to say so they can tell their boss the right thing, and I know that world well. I cannot tell you what the audience is going to like or what they're going to do, and I'm like just spinning around, throwing stuff out there, and as soon as something works, I'm like, yep, that was it. I knew it the whole time, when really I had no idea.
That's a really candid a really candid analysis, because folks like me then wonder. You've got the world as your oyster, and because you are getting this immediate feedback, are you able to take advantage of data analytics that are telling you who is actually watching, when they're watching, what their comments are online? I mean, a really good example would be Shonda Rhimes and Shondaland. When Scandal would premiere a brand new episode, Bahamian, Caribbean Facebook would light up, and we're talking about millions of impressions that particular show's showrunner had not anticipated. But they pivoted quickly. Within 3 to 4 episodes, they were then able to target those users in those countries, because we now have the tools to very, very precisely focus an advertising campaign or a viral marketing campaign. Are any of you taking advantage, or how are some of you taking advantage of those more nuanced marketing tools?
Well, I can speak for Vindabona, and for those that aren't aware of Vindabona, we created America's Funniest Home Videos, and we're going into now our 28th season.
Sure.
So we have a lot of clips, a lot of videos. Our library is strong. It's over 1 million videos, and it grows thousands every week. And we have absolutely used this idea of data-driven content decisions to fuel what we decide to make. Now there's absolutely two fields that we look at. We look at experimentation and creativity and just throwing it at the wall and seeing what sticks, but we also look at the different platforms we're on. We look at YouTube, and we look at Instagram, and we look at Musical.ly and Snapchat and all these other places, and we can pull back in the data, and we can see, to your point, what's lighting up. What are people responding to? It may not even be the video. It might just be the metadata that they're responding to, the tags. And from that, we can apply it to this massive library and really start to craft a new IP that sticks for that demo on that platform and pivot really quickly.
Now, is that a proprietary tool that only you have access to, or is that something that you would recommend to some of your esteemed friends in this audience?
It's both. We have invested some dollars into just our own IP, but a lot of it does come from outside vendors. I can't even suggest them all. There's just so many of them. You really just got to take it in and see what they have to offer. And a lot of it, honestly, what we've discovered in our journey for the last 10 years in using data is that there aren't many vendors that can offer what you want. It really is like offering a starter package, and then there is some scope and development that goes into tweaking it. But you do end up getting to a point where you can use a tool that really does give you informed content decisions. It's very useful.
But you know what we're missing, though, is that the big ticket item is still cable and network television. They're the guys that still write the big checks.
Sure.
And yet they're not doing anything really that pushes this analytic sort of direct audience thing. They're still doing spots and dots. They're still doing upfronts and 30-second commercials and Nielsen boxes with 8,000 boxes in the entire country. And everything is based on this hocus pocus rating science that everybody knows is out of date. And everybody knows it's totally useless, except for everybody in that world is still making a ton of money, and they're really happy with the way things are. So while YouTube and all these other places online have this amazing analytics, the real world, the world that we're trying to get the big checks from, and Amazon and Netflix won't tell you what goes on in their worlds, they won't share that information. So it's like you can see stuff work exactly online, and on cable where you're getting the big dollars from, no idea what's happening. No idea who's watching those shows really. No idea what they look like. They just take it from a Nielsen and estimate it.
Well,
estimating it in 2017.
Because ratings to date have largely been extrapolated based on, the viewing habits of a small percentage. I mean, Nielsen only 3 weeks ago introduced, an online option. I'm waiting
obscene.
for them to start monetizing, the viewer transfer. If I'm opting to videotape or VCR or whatever term we'd like to use, if I'm opting to transfer, that should count as well for an audience.
But they don't want it to count. That's the problem.
Well,
Because then they'll actually know how many people are watching.
that is
and
a
then they'd have
concern.
to pay or get paid based on that. And right now, they get paid based on estimates. That's a great business.
And
if
that's
you're
a
on
real
that side of it.
and that's a real opportunity if you are in programmatic analytics, because you're absolutely right. Other parts of the world have been able to quite precisely articulate their actual audiences. The U.S. seems to be wanting to retain this old-fashioned gamed opportunity, which, to put it delicately, that doesn't really show off to best advantage really good shows as they take off. I think we've seen a few hits, in the last couple of years where, Game of Thrones was not exactly encouraged at first in the boardrooms. Luke Cage was dismissed out of hand. There have been a lot of shows that people took a chance on that turned out they end up blowing up into huge hits, largely because of the strength of their audience and their audience taking advantage of viral marketing strategies. So I think that that's a really good point that you make, that as an independent producer you're going to face, and you're going to want to make yourself familiar with these data analytics tools, programming tools, because they are out there. And 20 years ago when I first got started, we're talking major subscription fees, but a lot of the time now the data is absolutely available, especially if you're going to joint venture as a content developer. People need content as much as you need their data analytics, and that's an opportunity for partnership as well.
I put a caveat on that, though.
Yes.
Be very careful with vetting these people, because
Absolutely.
there is so much smoke and mirrors out there. Just going through the digital evolution of, like, to your point, YouTube, and then developing MCNs, and then people getting rolled up into MCNs, and then seeing the rise and fall of them.
Sure.
And then once they've fallen, you pull back the curtain, you say, oh, wait a minute, it's actually just 100 people with Excel spreadsheets trying to work out rev splits. I mean, you really have to go at it with a very light foot and also very skeptical idea towards it, because you could get burned.
I think that was the entire plot line of a character arc on Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Exactly. Look behind the curtain, but not too closely.
Not too
because
close.
you can manipulate the numbers. That's the beauty of data, but that is the danger of data. And with anything, I think you have to be somewhat cynical moving forward, but you do want to be able to show off your projects to best advantage, and certainly not take no for the first answer. I'm sure that any of you that have presented projects for pitching, know that you do have to be somewhat optimistic, whether you're creating literally in Hollywood or you're reinventing the wheel in Columbia, South Carolina. The good news is the tools are so much less expensive now than they ever have been, that you can properly tell a story without having to cater to what had been the lowest common denominator. I mean, I'm from the Bahamas, and I came out here in '86 and just laughed, because as far as Hollywood was concerned for the longest time, everybody from anywhere in the Caribbean spoke with a Jamaican accent, loved reggae, and, deified Bob Marley. And that's wonderful, and it's correct for a lot of people, but it certainly doesn't tell the, entire story. We like Zouk, we like ska, we like calypso, we like goombay, we like junkanoo. It's been kind of fun. But getting back to some of what we were talking here, let's talk about some of the opportunities and challenges that you've perceived.
We do use data and analytics in the social media advertising typically, but in terms of a lot of the newer Amazon and Netflix, they don't do as much in terms of their trailers, and research and whatnot. But we have pivoted in our some social media campaigns to try to sort of target an audience that we know is actually watching, who our audience is. For example, in Animal Kingdom, which was a TBS show last year, it started out as a sort of a really intense crime family drama, but through social media we found out that guys with their shirts off was really sort of what people were really responding to.
Who would have thunk?
So that became a
What are
lot
the
more
odds?
of the what we started putting out more of.
So you were responding to the data not just after the fact, which is what where a lot of people make that mistake. They produce the show, they take it to distribution, and they try to analyze after the fact what they did and how they could make it better the next time around. What you're doing is taking the data to inform in real time what you could be doing to improve the program.
Absolutely. So we just pivot our campaign to sort of feed the audience that we know is really, really eating it up.
Anyone else on the challenges and the opportunities?
I mean, I think it's great that you're able to analyze them for kind of a business standpoint, but as a program maker, it's invaluable, even though you don't have access to all the great numbers
Right.
that are available in the minute by minutes. All those things are, as you quite rightly say, most often bullshit, but or at least indicative of a bunch of stuff that's perhaps unclear to us all. Let's put it that way. But as a program maker, you get to see the tweets and you get to see the Facebook. So I mean, even on a very kind of very simple, very kind of perhaps very incorrect as you can get with the trolls and folks who just don't like things, who don't get out enough.
They don't want anything to change.
Don't change the show based on one guy not liking your show. Definitely be careful of just responding on that sense.
Well, and I did that lots when I was at the network. We'd have these focus groups in Vegas, and you'd give people $25 and a sandwich and be like, hey, what do you think of the new show? And then they feel like they have to talk and come up with an opinion. And so they ramble on about stuff. And then the next thing you know, you're making programming decisions based on these 8 people. And you're like, why are we doing this? Like, she didn't really feel like that. She's just saying that so people think she's smart or that she
was hungry.
Yeah, exactly. And,
Yeah.
and so we chased our tail around lots of times. And I feel like you can do the same thing now with social media because people, it's even easier. It's a focus group that people can do from their couch. And who doesn't want to say something interesting that will get comments? And you're running around trying to adjust your show because 12 people or 15 people made a remark. It's just like what the news does when they're like, there was outrage on social media, and you're like, there was? There's like 6 people that said something mean, but made a headline for you. And I think that we probably fall into the same thing where you're like, oh my God, 17 people were commenting about this. We got to change the show. And
Which begs the point, what active filters are you deploying to make sure that you're hearing from actual, thoughtful influencers and not just Joe hoi polloi that wants to, yank your chain?
I mean, we don't really use data analytics in independent feature film production.
Okay.
So for us, we do the like the test screenings, which are again like
The old-fashioned approach.
the old-fashioned way, and I think that's probably where we're lacking because unlike these new platforms, we don't have the ability to really understand what people want to watch. We're really working off of like past information. Like, okay, this person had a really big movie that came out, let's put him in our movie.
Sure. So serial shows can obviously have more of a chance
Exactly.
to deploy some of these than, like you say, here is our project. What do you think? And then hopefully you take notes for the next project. But your feedback is a lot more slow going.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Now, how much in the way of a diversified marketplace are you taking advantage of? Are you understanding that you've got viewers that might want to see material in a language other than English? Are you taking that into consideration? I mean, here, I always fall back on LA Unified School District. We've got 108 languages spoken here. There are 8 languages on every sample ballot. That's a huge opportunity for a content developer because you've got producers that want to see content that reflects their community. When I was on the board of KCET, we were able to develop, African American programming. We were able to, we developed it as Mesopotamian because Persian and Iranian and Iraqi was too volatile at the time. But, cultural programming that storytellers can germinate around and have an audience follow. How have you been able to take advantage of that?
We primarily develop English language projects.
Okay.
But we actually have a department at our company. It's separate. It's called Lexica, and they acquire. We acquire foreign language projects that don't necessarily get distribution in other territories. So there are a lot of films out there that, let's say it's a Polish film that are really great, but it only screens in Poland, and then nobody else around the world sees it.
And you pick those up.
And so that's one of our new business models, is picking up the rights for other territories.
That's good, because the only film studio that we've worked with locally anyway is a Cinema Libre that does that same sort of thing, where they'll pick up like this incredible Abyssinian project. It's like, hello, thank you. And it's pretty esoteric, but I mean, there is a market for that. I mean, if you're a student of the world, you kind of like to keep up on the international conversation. I just didn't know how instrumental it had been yet in any of your individual business models catering to those markets. When I was at Time Warner Interactive in the early 90s, everything we produced, we did in 4 languages.
Yeah, but I think the content dictates that, because you need to have content that they're going to be like, okay, well, let's translate this because there's more of a market for it, because that's how the check follows it. It's almost impossible to do it the other way around, because there's not enough consumer demand, which equals consumer dollars, which equals pay to make the content.
So this is the class in chicken or
Yes.
the egg question.
Yeah, because like I did a documentary film in English here in the United States, and it's been translated now like 15 or 16 different languages. Never once did I think about doing it in another language or adding anything to it until the distributor was like, hey, we have a sale in France.
Oh, there
I'm
you
going
go.
to put it in French.
Yeah,
And it's like,
sure.
ooh, hey, it's in Norway. Guess what? And that's like, great. But I would never have thought like, I've got to change my content because there's more markets out there.
Okay.
Unless someone was like, hey, I'll pay you to make some more content for other markets. And I'm totally ready for that at any moment.
Yeah. We've never changed our content because the content itself is very universal. Who doesn't want to see someone get kicked in the crotch?
Right, yeah.
But what we do change,
Hey, slapstick.
slowly got it.
Laurel and honey.
But so to your point about chasing the check, for obviously broadcast is where the money is, and YouTube and these other platforms cannot yet compete with that. What we do find ourselves changing with our content is actually what's happening behind the contents, the metadata. I'll give you an example. Mexico is extremely data-driven, and they're all on their mobile phones. And in fact, their data plans are cheaper than their voice plans down there, because they've missed DVDs, they missed all the actual hard footage. So what we've done with a lot of our content, since it actually is universal, is but we retranslate the metadata, the tags, the titles, the descriptions, and then put it out back into YouTube, because that's how people are digesting it within their territory.
Brilliant.
And suddenly you discover a whole new bubble of people that, while they do fit your demo, they don't necessarily fit your language. And now you've opened up a whole new area of people to digest your content. And dollars do follow, not to the extent of broadcast, but they definitely follow.
And with your very specific videos, are you dubbing or hiring new actors? What are you doing?
No, the majority of our videos don't need any of that, which is good.
Because it's visual
It's
humor.
just visual humor.
Okay.
And
So you're saying being kicked in the crotch is this universal
You
language.
don't, you
Your
don't
folks.
need the subtitles. But most of it is actually it's visual humor. Now the stuff that granted there is stuff in the library that you would only get had you understood the language that it's presented in, but that is a small percentage of what we actually.
For the most part, the footage stands on its own.
This footage stands and speaks for itself, and then it's just how you package it in terms of metadata to reach a new audience.
Totally stealing that.
What's that?
Totally stealing that.
By the way, I'm thinking the exact
Totally.
same
And
thing.
We're going to get back to
I can only speak from a marketing perspective, because I'm not a show creator or anything. But in terms of the advertising, we do definitely create mostly globally now. Everything for Netflix is mostly global, and then what they do is they localize it out to their markets, and they're the ones that then apply the subtitles or other things that they might need to advertise it in their territories.
And actually, just to say, I talked a little bit about changing the show for the US broadcast. As it goes out, we're doing a show called Cooper's Treasure, which finale is tonight at 10 p.m. on Discovery Channel. Check it out.
Yes.
And we are, you could call it down to the wire a little bit in terms of post, but we are able to change the show accordingly. However, we're also seeing tweets from overseas and Facebook from overseas, and it's helping us avoid making some changes sometimes, because we're able to speak to whoever's giving us the note and say, look, they love this in Australia. Let's leave that. Let's not second guess ourselves, because obviously it still comes down to gut on the production, and it has to come down to gut. We can, to your point, Brent, you could chase your tail, and you can be making a show for 7,000 people, but there are 7,000 people who are not in my office.
Well,
So
and the
it drives us
audience,
crazy.
it's still a passive watching experience. So what we're doing is trying to ask them to give us feedback on something that they don't want to be engaged in, really.
Right.
They want to watch it and be entertained. It's almost like they want you to put something together and tell them how to watch it so they can just experience it. And then when you try to get them to reprocess, tell me why you liked it, tell me why it was appealing. Like, you don't really get the answers in a genuine way, not because they're trying to mislead you, but because it's not really how they watched it in the first place. They were either drawn to it and they got this passive experience which they liked. And so trying to explain, hey, give me some active responses so I can tailor my show so you can watch it passively again, is definitely it's a difficult cycle.
That's a good point, because I think you probably have to lead the conversation somewhat. I know with, I first worked with Doctor Who back in 1983. When it was first dubbed in Arabic, which was absolutely hilarious. But as virtual reality started to rear its head 15 years ago, we've been talking about it for a long, long time, fans were suggesting augmented reality opportunities at conventions. A lot of shows kind of lend themselves to that. I guess it depends on whether your show is so specifically linear that you can't imagine having an audience contribute. I mean, we've seen music concerts over the years where, Todd Rundgren and Peter Gabriel were at the forefront of asking their fans to incorporate these AR tools to rework the music that they had created. And you're taking a chance, but some artists have been driving that conversation by saying, look, here's the content that you love. What would you do with it? Show me. Are you finding that you're having any of those conversations at this point? Because you do have the ability to engage your viewer far more broadly than you ever have before. Forget about just the production feedback. You're able to use your fan base to help drive further storylines. You're able to use your fan base to drive further corporate sponsorship or brand placement based on the country in which you want to either shoot or distribute. So are these the sorts of things that you're talking about at the boardroom level? Again, it's tough because the feedback you get from the audience is hard to interpret. It's like if you were a stand-up comedian and you asked people, okay, was it funny? Did you like it? They would know how to respond. I laughed a little bit. I laughed a lot. And they don't want to hurt your feelings. Well, but then even if it was someone asking on a third party or a third person. But if you said, okay, well, how could they make it funnier? It'd be like, you'd get less and less answers that were valuable. And then if you said, okay, well, can you tell me how to make the joke, rewrite the joke so it was funnier? So it's like now, not only are they giving you general ideas, but now you're asking them for specific. Every time you get into that, it takes away from what their genuine response was, which is, I laughed. That's about all you can really get from an audience. I liked it. I didn't like it, because there are so many elements that are going on, from branding, from the time they're watching it. So every time you try to get more and more detailed information, it skews it a little more, and it's difficult. And I think that because our medium is so created and we craft it, we think that we can get that same. So you're very much, the Spielberg mindset, where this is the screen that I am sharing with you, as opposed to multi-screen. Yes. Like because your audience, as you're saying, they just want to kick back and they just want to be entertained. And that's absolutely been the backbone of entertainment to now. Yes. And then you see that when it translates into YouTube with the viewing times effectively, is that they literally want to click on it and be entertained that second. You barely get 5 seconds now where they'll wait for that ad to click off. You barely get that. And if they click, and if that doesn't entertain them like right now, they're like, next video, click, 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 And that talks to other tools that are on the market that, lessen the pain of in-your-face banner ads and instead pop that brand somewhere subtly in the background of a scene. Yeah. And that we're seeing, I think PBS probably premiered that model because technically they weren't supposed to be advertising. But that seems to be the way of the future, because I don't think you need to hold someone captive for 30 seconds, or as Phillips used to, 5 minutes, and learn about this DVD player to get your point across. And I think that if you engage your viewer, I think they're going to stick around to see what other shows you have coming down the pipeline.
Again, speaking only to marketing,
fine.
we
Yes.
actually find that this is really challenging in terms of getting people to pay attention to the product in 6 seconds. So a lot of our campaigns, most of our campaigns now are all mobile first. So everything we do, we think about how will this look on mobile.
Great.
So much of all of our, from our graphics to our concepts, all of our ideation, what do we show first? Everything is like, how do we capture people in those first 3 seconds?
Okay.
And we creating YouTube bumpers or Instagram carousels, all of those things, we always take that into consideration.
Well, to the budding storytellers in the audience, what are you recommending with regard to not only laying down the basic story? How are you creatively taking advantage of available opportunities for funding for distribution?
Well, again, I can only speak to the advertising, so usually the product's already been made by the time it gets to us. But I
What
would
do you look
just
for?
reiterate what
What do
they
you look
said
for?
too. So much of what I find, even in advertising, is it comes down to your gut. I mean, you can get all the analytics in the world, and it does inform some things, but it's usually this nice balance between the two is usually the sweet spot where you end up finding the best work. But I think, if you just write from a really personal place, I think oftentimes, and obviously you have to know what the market is, but if you do that, I think that you'll end up probably coming up with something that you're proud of.
Well, in terms of film, one thing that has become a trend is the Rotten Tomatoes score
I
has
bet.
now directly affected the box office. So you can actually see how, the better the score, the better the box office. The
Because it
lower
comes
the
up with
score,
your immediate search.
yeah, and it actually follows the, the Rotten Tomatoes score correlates almost.
But that's a good
perfectly.
example of filtered results, because those
Yeah.
are known reviewers. I mean, Hoi Polloi does have a little box at the bottom where they can make their snarky comments. But for the most part, those responses have been filtered by some sort of, quasi-media organization. So that's helpful.
Yeah, they give the score to the review, but the review could be a totally, passive review. Like, it won't be, this was bad or this was good. It could just say, like, here's my review, but then it will assign it an actual score, the people at Rotten Tomatoes. So it's very misleading. We've had lots of experience with, bad Rotten Tomatoes scores, and good ones too. But, but yeah, so it's that I think you have to keep in mind, that the audience has a lot of power now.
I think the audience has more power now than they ever have,
Yeah.
and I think that that's something we've as content developers have really started to look at. I think you have to be looking at all opportunities, whether it's the advertising campaign or the celebrity endorsement. What sorts of things have worked for you as we progress in this digital media revolution? This is not your father's Oldsmobile. This is a brand new world. And as many of you have pointed out, the old tools, they might be comfortable, they might fit like an old shoe, but they might not necessarily buy you the next big audience. And it seems as though what we're really wanting to talk to in here is creating content that will address the needs of a niche market, but in turn address the interests of a broader market. Like, I look like a blue-eyed white girl, but I'm from the Bahamas. I resonate with stories from the Caribbean that understand that there are different priorities, different cultural imperatives. I like someone that can tell a story without resorting to stereotypes. So I tend to respond to Pan-African Film Festival, Caribbean Film Festival, anything. And as people figure that out online, they really don't care what color I am. They can tell by my commentary as to what I want to see and what I will invest in. And so I think that that's a huge opportunity. And I was just trying to get a sense of how you are taking advantage of this marketplace. Like, are you only relying on, Facebook and perhaps Instagram for your social media feedback, or are you taking a look at WeChat? Do you know what high five is?
I mean, it feels very micro for
Okay.
particularly where I am, where I'm just trying to
response.
be as broad as possible. But it's still like it's a little chicken and the egg. Like, it really still boils down to success is the best angle into all of these things.
Sure.
When you have a show that works, everything works. Your social media works, your brands work, your integrated content works, your mobile phone stuff works, everything works. And so reverse engineering is tough because if
You're
you get the
suggesting
content
that's
to
not
work-
necessarily by design, it's often by luck.
It's not even luck. It's almost like once you're in past the castle into the gates, it's like, oh, everything works in here. It's trying to get there that's really difficult. And so it's like if you get something that works, it's like, oh, you get the chicken, you get the egg, you get your cake, you get to eat it too. Everything works in there. Like we did Bar Rescue, and it's like, well, we had brands falling all over us.
Yeah.
But I can't go to the brands now and be like, hey, listen, I created Bar Rescue, and now I'm doing another one. Give me all the same stuff. They're like, well, we'd like to see Bar Rescue work, whatever this version is, and then we'll throw it at you again. So you're still stuck in that mode where it's like, it's really hard to,
So you find that you're always
kickstarted anywhere
proving your
else.
next project.
Always.
You can never rest on your laurels.
and everybody's based on success. Everybody wants to see it work. If you're gonna put a movie on, it better have a star that has done reasonably well before, otherwise, guess what? Nobody wants to play. If you could put The Rock in your next movie, everybody would be there. Your social media would go through the roof. You'd probably have great Rotten Tomatoes before you even started. The whole world opens up when everything works. So it's really hard to start something from scratch and use all the success filters that every other project has used because they're sort of drafting off the success of the content at its core.
What would you recommend to a budding storyteller?
Get a different job. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Not really.
You sound like my dad.
I'm kidding. Again, I think there's definitely opportunity now that's being created by this quick micro attention span. For some reason, like podcasts are wildly popular right now. I literally just started a podcast of my own, and it's doing better than probably most of my TV shows have. And if you talk to the guys at Podcast One, if you look at what they do, it's like you do audio only. Like, what year are you working in? But what they say is like the audience is craving this content. They can't get enough. They can't get enough people on their channel because with the clicks and the fast interaction, people actually want conversation, and that's the one thing that they're missing. Radio has sort of died out because of the music and Apple Music and being able to get it, but the conversational style,
Yeah, the talk radio aspect is huge.
they love it. So from a storytelling standpoint, if you're into this trying to create content and build brands, it still needs to be really good at its core. And I think that overthinking it and trying all these different angles, you might be trying to cheat that maybe it's not that good at its core. I'd probably start right at the very beginning of, hey, is this good?
Well, the fact is, though, Hollywood has always been about branding content, whether it was, Masterpiece Theater or, as sponsored by Texaco. That reality has always been here. It's just been a matter of figuring out how to increase awareness without boring the daylights out of your audience. And the ways and means of advertising got really out of hand there for about 10 years.
Well, imagine being NBC right now. You used to have, must-see TV on Thursday night
And they're going to try that again.
where nobody could go anywhere else. There
Right.
was only a few networks. They owned you. And they could do anything. Now, what on earth would bring you to NBC specifically over any other network?
It had to be
They have nothing else to offer other than they better come up with a great show or or something. And now I think for a lot of content creators, that is terrifying. It's a terrifying position to be in. Really, you're just out there by yourself with the quality of your content. Ooh, I don't even like saying it.
Well, since you mentioned NBC, I mean, they've been at the forefront of integrating some of the newer technologies into their traditional shows, so that's been kind of cool. I don't know if you're following Blind Spot. We had the showrunner on this panel, I think 3, maybe 4 seasons ago, and he was a complete newbie. He had no idea what any of us were talking about. But by the end of the panel, the light bulb had gone off, and Blind Spot has showcased some pretty cool virtual reality shots, obviously limited within the context of a flat screen, but it really did do a lot to drive the plot forward. And it so effectively. I mean, the whole plot line begs AR, VR complements and outreach. And so I think that you do have some opportunities because you've got, forget 500 channels. I mean, I can't keep up with our setup. You've got so many options, and everybody's going back to satellite. I mean, I grew up in the middle of nowhere with a satellite dish, and it was wonderful, but I had to rely on buzz. I had to rely on what I was hearing in the community, or, hope that a TV guide made it in a timely fashion. You've got so many opportunities now to get the word out on how great your show is, how unique it is. And I think that what we can talk to now is, since we are to be, talking about developing the content from a business perspective as a standalone brand, we've discussed data analytics. We've understood that that's important, figuring out who's on first. We've talked about niche markets for the taking. Given the low cost of storytelling tools now, I mean, my first computer in 1992, I had to take out a loan to buy. Computers are so much less expensive. Do we think, as a panel, has Hollywood taken full advantage of its storytelling capability? I mean, is it really targeting all markets? Or are we still rehashing the same 7 plot lines with my beef, the same 5 brunette actors? I mean, my first season with Game of Thrones was beyond confusing, because I'm like, okay, is that the bastard's son? Or is this the king? It was like they all looked alike. Where's the diversity in programming? Are we getting any better in that?
It's tricky.
I don't know if I can speak too much to that, because ours is such a very well-established format for, a shiny floor with a host and a 40-minute clip show.
Yeah.
But we have started to recognize the importance of digital media in terms of it actually integrating it within the show. 3 years ago, we started to get these very strange 6-second videos in a very square format. We had no idea what the hell this was.
Vine.
But how can you tell a story in 6 seconds when clips, even though they might be on average 45 seconds, they have a beginning, a middle, and end, and they tell a story? Nevertheless, we were getting a deluge of these 6-second videos, and we realized, okay, our audience, true to their form, are submitting now what they use. So we started to integrate Vine compilations, Vine music montages. We had Viners on the show, playing games on the show. So to try to bridge that gap from traditional media to digital media was really important to us. And we've tried a couple of other things. And some things, some things fall on their face, but other things are super successful. Last season, we had a Musical.ly call to action where we had people submit videos of them making up their dads while they're sleeping with makeup. And Musical.ly received 138,000 uploads of this, tagged for AFV, to get on our show.
Brilliant.
And that is a win. We didn't get 138,000 uploads, but the platform shows that it could be tested and proven within our brand. And so that's one of the ways that at least AFV has made a bridge using the digital media world.
Makes sense. I mean, because we all remember American Idol. They made more money on those SMS texts that you used to send in your vote for your favorite singer than they did on advertising.
Right.
So there are tools to help.
That was for a very, very brief time.
It was 2 years. It was 2 seasons.
Because it was like, oh, hey, people still pay for text messages. Well, that went away very quickly.
The U.S. was the last country in the world to get away with charging 99 cents per text. Yeah.
And then it was like, by the later seasons, it was like they weren't getting a lot of calls or votes at all.
Well, they were. They syndicated that show like mad around the world, where people were still paying, but like 20 cents per text, not 99 cents.
20 cents would be great right now.
Yes.
The plot lines that's really dictated by the audience themselves. It's hard for any studio or creator or anybody to like reinvent the way the audience follows a story. I just did.
Oh, no, I wasn't suggesting that you would be
We're
using your
taking advantage of
audience
that.
to be, the arbiters of your actual content. I was just wondering what kind of feedback you were getting from the greater population out there as to the sorts of shows that they want to see.
I think it's interesting because like I just did on my podcast, I had about the WWE and how it's still so big in a world where it kind of feels like muscle guys in tights romping around play wrestling shouldn't really have a place in our new sort of entertainment world. But they really do those 7 storylines with the same brunettes.
Absolutely.
And the audience is still as huge as ever because they like the good guy and the bad guy loses.
And just check the box office of the last 12 superhero films. I mean, yeah, it's the same thing.
Yeah, and it's not
I mean,
complicated.
Luke Cage is really the only new take on that sort of grabbed everybody's attention. It tends to be, and I think we've got a Wonder Woman that's back for a second season. And so that's helping.
Yeah, but those brands have also changed, though. They aren't the same brands that they used to be. They are absolutely using digital media, social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook.
Very savvy.
And whether they're either incorporating into the actual brand itself or they're using it as an extension. The reason why is, the demographic grows up, it moves on, it finds something else that it's interested in. And you need to get the new kids that love WWE, and you need to get the new kids that love America's Funniest. And the America's Funniest kids aren't on television. They're on YouTube, they're on Instagram. So you have to find those bridges, whether it's a movie or a TV, into this new media, which, I think it tried to maybe 5 or 10 years ago to be 2.0, and that it just flopped. But now we're there. I think now we're actually starting to talk about a revolution of new media as it pertains to broadcast brands, and that's really important. You need to pivot that.
Sure.
I think it's tricky. I mean, it's tricky because I think as program makers, it used to be a pipe. We're at one end and then the outlet is the other end. But I think now if you're a smart producer, you've got to be circumventing that pipe.
Yeah.
We just did a Facebook Live thing in our office. We have a studio at the back of our building, which we're very lucky because we can provide that now. That wasn't something that would have been an option or someone brought up in even a meeting 3 years ago or 2 years ago, especially without pushing, without everyone in the production team saying, hey, we got this opportunity, we got this thing, we'll provide the studio, we've got space. I think you're going to be thinking about those opportunities. And to your point, actually, about podcasts, I mean, we're rebooting Cold Case Files for A&E. And one of the biggest, most exciting parts of that, certainly for my mum, is that we're doing a podcast of it. And we're recutting the show that we spent a lot of time shooting, turning it into a radio show. Don't worry about it. We just shot it on Alexa. It's fine. It's a lot of hard work. We moved a lot of lights around. Don't worry about it. It's going to do probably just as well and frankly reach perhaps more ears with a podcast. But it's interesting you talk about the marketing. On the one hand, we're also providing 60 or 70 videos for Instagram and Facebook for Cold Case Files, and we're going through those with a fine-tooth comb, making sure the very first image grabs you by the eyeballs, so you click on it. At the same time, we're having an hour-and-a-half version of a podcast or a 60-minute of a podcast because the engagement is actually probably greater on a podcast. So it's a really kind of a strange new game we're playing.
How is this impacting, how are all of these assets impacting the way you merchandise any project? Who are you teaming up with? Whether the ideas that you're rolling out or the corporations that you're aligning with?
I mean, we're definitely, I think you'd be an idiot if you're not looking at VR. I think you'd be, any new technology that's out there to use, there's a few which we're working with right now. Just, it's tricky because you're going to networks that it's going to blow their mind when you walk in. They won't even know how to use it, a lot of them. So it's a strange period also because that pipe is still there. Even though you're trying to go around it, you're still selling to a person in the room who's ultimately a television station rather than, we want to blow the brains off of, all these people using their smartphones to experience television.
Yeah, I have a VR project, a series now that's all based around VR. And it still plays on the linear channel because they're just going to see it in a 2D version, which is great. But we have a major brand attached to sort of fund the whole thing. but the brand only wanted a small piece of the VR. They wanted the VR, but that was only a small piece of the value.
Okay.
The rest of them were like, okay, well, if you've got VR and you're in someone's house, we want to do the appliances and we want to do the TVs and we want to do the electronics as well, because that's a bigger consumer market for
sure.
us. So it allowed us to get a broader use of that brand. But when you strip it all down, it's like, okay, so after all of this work and all the excitement, you're telling me my VR is just a tiny little device by all the thing it's done. It's like it's almost like a throwaway at the end. They get to announce it and sound like it's cool. There's a few people that may use it, but when it's all said and done, it's an advertising play for TVs and washing machines, and it's a TV show play so they can sell 30-second spots.
Interesting. Okay, good insight. How about you guys? How is this mad new world impacting the way you?
Well, what we're doing more and more, we find, is we're doing co-branded spots where we share the cost of the ads
Good.
with other brands. So we sort of combine the entertainment space with the brand space, and we create these like branded experiences that feel like original content. That are long form pieces that play on the internet, or we cut them down to for advertising purposes.
But you're sticking to the core media in which it was produced. You're not like branching out into theme parks or magazines or.
We do some of that stuff, but for the most part, in terms of just straight up advertising, that's we're doing co-branded experiences. Yeah.
Okay. No.
I do want to speak to one thing you said earlier about is the audience changing or a story's changing. And one thing that I am finding, which I'm curious to hear what people here have to say about it, is that audience tastes are changing so much in terms of the younger generation.
Yeah.
I find that my nieces and nephews spend most of their time now looking at Instagram, looking at YouTube, and the quality that they're willing to accept as entertainment is just absolutely mind-boggling. So yeah, and that's just so baffling
That's
to
our
me.
bread and butter, man.
Yeah. Yeah, and these are
3 of those kids in the house.
Yeah.
And all 3 of them are big AFV fans, huge. But they don't watch TV almost at all anymore. And my daughter, 13, will watch YouTube 8 hours straight, no problem, without even blinking. I have to go and get her to do something else on the weekend, otherwise she will watch YouTube nonstop, because she just likes that form of entertainment, and she likes things that speak right to her, and she likes the ability to just swipe them away right there.
Yeah.
And she has no context for traditional TV and why that would be her first thing. When she's in the kitchen and something's on Nickelodeon or whatever, she'll get mesmerized and stare there and watch it, but no more than if a YouTube video is on. They have no connection with that.
And I'm curious to see how that development is. As they get older, do they start wanting to see more of the, this high-end content, or are they going to be just happy to experience both?
I don't think so. I think that they just let the world of connected media I don't think they care where it comes from. Mixed media now is like completely accepted and totally fine. Even when I did my Facebook movie, it was not very well done. Like, I had mixed media that was all over the place. The production value was awful. I didn't tell I'm not kidding, not a single person in my business that I did this film until it was already premiering, and I was like, okay, it's at a pretty good festival, so I guess I can maybe talk about it. Because I don't want to say I was embarrassed, but I was like, this is not at the level that I've built my entire career producing. And out of the hundreds of thousands of comments that I've got, maybe like 2 comments were like, oh, the production value was kind of crappy. Nobody else seemed to notice or care in today's world. And I was like, oh, wow. And I sweat bullets over it.
Sure.
It's tricky, and I think there's 2 ways of looking at it. I think you're totally right. It shocks me when I look at the kids in our office, they're watching stuff on YouTube, and you go, oh, it looks really great. That's awesome.
Yeah. Thanks. I'm glad I spent my whole career working.
But at the same time, I think the audience has become sort of a little bit network agnostic. I think that's not a secret. I think the show they're watching before mine could be Game of Thrones, and the one they're watching afterwards could be Walking Dead. And it will be a click of a switch, as opposed to waiting for a whole cycle of a night's programming to go through. So I think the other end of the spectrum is our shows have to look and feel and have as great stories as those shows. And it doesn't matter about budget. No one's going to give me a free pass because I didn't have as much money as Game of Thrones had. They're going to say, are the characters good? Is the story good? And does it look good?
Sure.
So that's sort of barometer of success that we have.
It's ironic that we're dealing with, increasingly smaller screens, given what had been the arc before.
Yeah.
What I'd like to do, unless anyone has any final comments, is open up the questions and answers to the audience for a bit.
Sure.
Does anyone have something that they'd like to? Hello.
I think they are going to change, but I said that 5 years ago too. And I suspect 5 years from now I'll be doing a panel like this saying at any point these revenue models are going to change. But right now, the big conglomerates and the big cable and broadcast networks have the distribution channels and they have the cash because they have Madison Avenue. And Madison Avenue has all of the brands and all of the brands have your consumer dollars. And there are so many people stuck in that system that are holding on for dear life to keep it, that it's been way slower than I think any of us would have predicted. If you looked at it, we all thought this was going to move so much faster.
Sure.
But the middle of the country and a lot of this country is it's a lot slower moving towards these things than we think, especially, particularly when you get out into the coasts. And so I think that it will still be a while before the YouTubers can figure out how to sort of get into that same world. And I had two really big YouTubers on my podcast, and I asked them, like, why aren't you as big a celebrity as any of these other people? You have millions of subscribers. And Freddie Wong said it best. He said, the problem is I'm really good at making money for myself. Nobody else makes money on me. There's no studio, there's no executive, there's no assistants, there's no brand, there's nobody else attached to this world getting rich. And at the end of the day, a TV show gets everybody rich. A big movie makes everybody rich. The people that do the lighting, all the people that do the catering, like there's so much commerce. And on the digital side, it's so focused on one person. It's very hard for that shift until it becomes like critical mass. And then what I think will happen is the big conglomerate guys will be like, okay, we've had this switch in our back pocket the entire time, and now we've changed the way we do things. So it's really tough. It's still very traditional.
Yeah, and I think that as a program maker now, and I come from England, where when I started my career, I was working at companies who own the content. As a producer in England, you own the content. You come to America, you don't own the content. You are a work for hire most oftentimes. Obviously, that's not 100% cut and dried, but there are models available. But to your point, they're the guys that own the shop, and you want to put your stuff in the shop so you can get it out there. To your point about YouTube stars, and I think that's an interesting model. I think when all the networks become apps, and we lose the commercials, I think then the conversation is going to change. But all the while we're trying to sell 42.5 minutes in a given time slot on an evening, which makes or breaks your show. I think we don't get a look in it. It's got to be about product on the shelf with commercials in it, and the revenue stream isn't a conversation we get to have.
So do you think it's just lightning in a bottle that you've got so many internet personalities that are making good money? They're not part of a system. They're not part of a studio per se, but like when you mentioned Bar Rescue. Sky John is a bartending sensation on YouTube with 12 million viewers. He pulls in 20,000 a month. He's happy as a camper. United Talent Agency just signed him with an idea toward perhaps populating his content across greater media. I think that's an opportunity too for people who don't necessarily have access to the traditional studio system.
And again, that works great. The problem is he makes $20,000 a month and nobody else connected to him, and Bar Rescue makes $20 million a month. And
I understand.
That's like
I'm talking
you
baby
can't-
steps.
It's really hard to undo that system, particularly when you go to like General Motors.
Yeah.
And they give all their money to the Madison Avenue guys to distribute their cash. If you had all the brands saying, that's it, we don't need you ad agencies anymore, we're just gonna give money to all the different places that the audience actually goes to, that would change it. It kind of makes sense, but for some reason, all of the major brands still do it in the traditional, simple way. Here's our ad allocation.
Right.
Here's the guys we're going to give it to, and you guys figure it out. And if they have that monopoly, and as long as they can keep it, this lane will be very hard to get out of.
Good point. Next question. Back.
Yeah, so I was in another workshop, and they were mentioning that the 25 to 56 demo is hard to reach on the social media, and I think that's maybe why the brands are sticking to the TV, because the older people that have more money that can afford a Lincoln or a Cadillac are watching the TV. My question is, what do you guys think would shift that older demographic to engaging in the social media platforms?
Good question. It's a very good question.
Probably hardware, ironically. It's probably the way they consume it. Like if I'm looking about my wife, 40-year-old, stay-at-home mom, the consumer that buys everything in the house, perfect ad target. The only thing that's going to get her to change her viewing patterns is if there's something that she can view it on that's convenient or easy or nice or kind of fun. Like she bounces from the TV in the kitchen area to the TV in our bedroom and maybe on her computer. But so it's like there's probably if I was going to pick something, I'd probably say some sort of hardware system that gives her another screen that she actually might use. And then, you know, the ability to connect her to her on that might be the only way through her, because you can't get her to use Facebook more or Twitter or Instagram. That's just not going to happen. That demo just is not going to migrate to engaging and making comments and playing that same game, I don't think.
Was that good? Mr. Hines. Hello.
Hi, so I'm a content developer for cannabis publications here in California, and I travel as well around the country with that. And I want to know, do you see the stigma of cannabis being lifted fairly soon when it comes, because there's 2 million users a day, 53 billion was spent on it last year. The footage and the images are out there of the people, and they are voting for this. So I want to know, what would your approach be? I have a documentary coming out this year, and I would love to know what your approach or what I should approach you guys saying. Like,
Did you originally say the stigma of cannabis? Okay, I wasn't sure.
I'm family friendly. I can't answer it. I don't know. I'm going to recuse myself from that one. The only thing I'll say to that, though, and we talked about it a little bit earlier, was that there is a general desensitizedness happening.
That's the word.
I guess, over content over the years, especially because of mobile devices and because of these new types of media, people are able to access this information a lot quicker and a lot more freely than they did before. And they're seeing a lot of stuff, and a lot of the stuff is sometimes uncensored. And so I think that there definitely is it's really slow.
It's slow.
It's so slow. But I think that there is a desensitization to topics such as that. I just think back to, when Ellen DeGeneres came out on her show, and that, however many years ago was that, 20?
20, they just celebrated the anniversary.
And only now, I mean, in the last 5 or so years, are we really embracing that kind of ideology holistically. So I say keep it up, because I think, it is certainly going to come, but I just think it's so unbelievably slow. And also, who are you catering to? I know, we can't dabble in it because of who's watching our show. We're family friendly. There's moms and dads, and we're co-viewed with kids. So they're just not there yet. And
Well, it's also more importantly who's paying for your
for who's
show.
paying for it, right?
Because
exactly.
the brands won't touch it with a
won't touch it.
10-foot pole, won't even go near it. And it's partially because of the access to the social media stuff. Like before, if you were outraged, you had to physically write a letter and send it in. Now, you can be outraged in one tweet in 5 seconds. And then someone else who didn't even watch the program can be outraged because they read your tweet. And they're like, that's ridiculous. And that's that ends it right this minute. So as a brand, they are so hypersensitive to this kind of thing. We announced a major celebrity on one of the shows and to come on to another season. And one of our major sponsors, when we were getting ready to do the next season, was like, yeah, if she's hosting, we're out. And it's such a minor issue in the way it went down. It was like, oh my God. But they just can't risk it. They don't want anything that would even come close. And cultural acceptance of cannabis and marijuana is not as fast as it feels. It's still really slow. And the brands are going to be so far behind.
Well,
It'll never get to where alcohol is.
Just to play devil's advocate, because we've seen a sea change in perception just in the Caribbean. No longer is it just a Rastafarian stereotype. Jamaica finally legalized medical cannabis, and they're exporting in the millions, and they're expecting to have a profit in the billions within the next 10 years because the medical aspect is becoming so important and ingrained. And it seems to me that a brand like Major League Baseball, all of whose baseballs are manufactured with hemp grown in Haiti, might be a fantastic brand to take the lead on this. They've got the celebrity endorsement aspect. They've got the opportunity across an entire nationwide market. And I think that they can have a sensible conversation about it.
Oh, then you probably haven't been dealing with Major League Baseball before. There's no sensible conversation with them at all.
I did with
You might as well try the NFL too. Then might as well group them in.
we're actually working with
They are
them.
just.
We're working with them on a hardware technology. We're deploying it in Barclays as a test run.
I had a show with the NFL, and it's a cooking show. And the knife that the chef put into the cutting board had an NFL logo on it, and they were like, "Nope, got to pull that out." And we're like, "Why?" It's like because it was a bit of a stabbing motion, and we don't want our brand on something that has a bit of a stabbing motion. We're like, "It's a chef knife in a cutting board," and that was it. It was out.
That's fascinating.
But at the same time, if it's culturally acceptable for the violence that some of the players
Perpetrate
go
on the
through,
field.
that's totally
Yeah.
different.
Yeah.
It's only what the public will put up with. Whatever the public will put up with, the brands are like, okay, you guys aren't going to send me angry tweets and letters? No problem. You are? Big problem.
Well, I think it's a great question. Good discussion to have. Mr. Hines, since you were first.
It's just so difficult to get them to think or act differently. The video game industry is a perfect example. like Grand Theft Auto, whatever they're on, has more downloads and buys and raises more money than all of the movies in the world combined, kind of thing. Like the numbers are staggering. Yet Madison Avenue isn't lined up at the video game guys' doors paying millions of dollars for a 30-second window into the Grand Theft Auto game. I can't even explain why that is. Same thing with esports. Like, there's so many people that play it, yet it's not really culturally taken as something real, where it's like NHL hockey. Nobody watches NHL hockey in the United States. Like, it's not like when I'm Canadian, so I'm a big fan, but they will spend more money on that sports property than they would on something that's online that's doing 10 times the number. And I don't know how to explain it, and I don't know how to change it. I just know that the people that control that world, they like it the way it is. Yeah.
I think they're attempting to. Whether some of those acquisitions were great ideas remains to be seen. They're certainly trying to capture lightning in a bottle.
Yeah, there was a lot of that done in haste, especially with Maker and Disney and stuff. But yeah, maybe, I don't know. But I think to your point, your 16-year-old son, while he is in that world, I don't think he is yet really being identified as the true consumer. I think it's still the husbands and wives,
25 to 54,
25 to 57-year-olds. I'm sure your son has a job and makes money, but they're not enough for the Madison Avenue product. So.
Well, and that's
No question.
But that's a sea change we've seen, because when I was at Time Warner Interactive heading up marketing in 1993, the entire focus on our games was the 16-year-old gamer, and we weren't paying attention to the 54-year-old that needed a decent reason, which was not going to be, Grand Theft Auto 12, to go out and buy an ancillary CD-ROM drive. And it wasn't until we repopulated this really old analog title, 7 Days in August, pictures and music from the week in 1961 that the Berlin Wall was going up, interviews with Khrushchev, interviews with JFK, the music of the time, the cars of the time, interviews with the construction workers that were disenfranchising their own German neighborhood. That caught on. That won title of the year. And that was not a game. It was not Hellcab. It was not about cab drivers killing people and throwing them off the Empire State Building. Sad to say, because at Time Warner, we had 12 iterations of that game. So I think, if anything, I think there's a newfound opportunity, realizing that the more mature audience, I think, is what they're trying to hold on to, for better or for
But
worse.
just look at what Mattel does. Mattel makes toys. That's the audience they're going for. Those kids aren't watching TV. Turn on Nickelodeon. How many ads are toy ads from Mattel?
Mm-hmm.
Where do they put the bulk of their spending? I don't know for 100%, but I'm pretty sure it's on 30-second spots and brand integration on TV. Try to explain that in today's world. How does that work? That the toy manufacturers aren't spending all of their money online. Why would they spend any on TV? Does it make any sense? I don't know. Somebody's got that system working for them, and that's what they're still doing. When they start to change, other people will start to change.
Powerpuff Girls, excuse me, sir. Powerpuff Girls. Just call me Bubbles. I think we have time for one more question.
Any platform that tells you that within a couple months they will start generating you 5 figures,
4 figures.
4, 3,
Yeah.
don't buy it. Literally, don't buy it. Don't buy into it. These data and analytics vendors, they're very good. A lot of their proprietary software is all kind of built on the foundation of simply just looking at the platform and pulling in the data. They all do it. Where you want to find your differentiating vendor you want to use is how do they distill that data? It's not even the sense of how do they even present it, because some of the most, we've seen companies that create dashboards that it looks like a Jackson Pollock. It's incredibly hard to understand. But those have also yielded the best kind of information because they can pull in demos, they can pull in watch time, they can pull in region and territory. Which data point is going to be most important for your content? What are you going to be interested in, and how do you want to pivot your content? How do you want to recreate your content? What data point it is, and then focus on that and see which vendor then offers that, to the best of their ability. But go into every single one of them with skepticism, every single one.
Any closing comments?
I was just going to say thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
And a great audience. Appreciate it.